Hello everyone, Dark of All Trades here. So now, I've forgotten a fair amount of things over the course of my life. I don't think I've forgotten anything due to or because of the fact that I'm an atheist. But, in a way, that's what this video wants me to do. This video comes from a channel claiming to provide reasons why you can trust the New Testament. The channel is called Testify, a simple name with lots of followers. Though I'm not sure how seriously I should take him with all these Reddit meme faces that are, frankly, overused. But his stylistic choices are not what we're here to evaluate. Today's video is titled, Atheists, Forget Pascal's Wager, Here's the Real Challenge. Well, I'd like to forget Pascal's wager, but something is telling me I need to know it to really address his points today. So without further ado, let's see why we should forget one bad argument and get into likely another.
Only heaven silence for an answer.
Christian apologists, let's be real. Pascal's wager is famous, but it's got some major flaws. The pitch is simple. If God exists and you believe, you win heaven. If God exists and you don't believe, you lose big time. If God doesn't exist, you lose nothing in comparison to gaining eternity, so it's smart to bet on God. But here's the thing. Philosophers have pointed out that Pascal's wager feels like a gamble with no clear rules. Which God are you betting on? Can you even force belief? And doesn't believing just in case feel kind of shallow?
Alright, credit where it's due. He gives a pretty fair summary of Pascal's wager. Pascal's wager is pretty well known, but let's not mistake familiarity for strength. Pascal's wager isn't famous because it's good. It's famous because it's good if you don't think about it for 5 seconds. It's famous because it's been thoroughly dismantled by philosophers for centuries, yet Christians somehow keep bringing it up. Take the which God problem. There's no divine name tag in the wager. Are we betting on Yahweh, Allah, Zeus? The divine lottery has too many tickets and no winning numbers. It's not just a gamble, it's roulette with infinite wheels. Next, can belief even be chosen like that? Try forcing yourself to believe in leprechauns because someone told you there's gold at stake. You can't honestly believe unless you are convinced. You can say you're convinced, but that's pretending. If there is a God who demands fake loyalty under threat, I think we all know that that's not a God worth worshipping. It's a cosmic tyrant. And the idea that you lose nothing if God doesn't exist, really? You might lose time, money, mental energy, and worst of all, your integrity if you're just going to go through the motions to hedge your bets. So he gets it. Pascal's wager is broken. The real question is, if that's his starting point, where is he going? Well, let's keep watching and we can ask ourselves, can any argument built on this foundation actually make the case for Christianity? Spoiler alert, probably not.
Enter Joseph Butler. In 1736, this 18th century bishop and philosopher offered an upgrade to Pascal's wager. Instead of playing theological roulette, Butler says, take Christianity seriously. Investigate it carefully with an open mind.
If someone holds a belief honestly, I always take that seriously. Always. This isn't about ridiculing sincerity. It's about testing whether an idea holds up when examined. So let me talk very briefly about Joseph Butler. He was a bishop and philosopher in the 1700s, best known for his Analogy of Religion in 1736. Butler didn't like Pascal's gamble either, so he reframed it. His argument was that the same reasoning we trust in daily life, like probabilities, moral instincts, and experience, should nudge us towards Christianity. He wasn't playing divine roulette, he was asking us to treat Christianity as a serious hypothesis. And I do, but treat it seriously isn't a shield from critique. It's an invitation to put it under the microscope. So let's do that.
Here's his reasoning. For probable proofs being added not only increase the evidence but multiply it. A mistake in rejecting Christianity could have far more serious consequences than a mistake in accepting it.
This reasoning might dress itself up as an upgrade, but it still leans on the same flawed structure as Pascal's wager. Butler says rejecting Christianity carries more risk than accepting it. But risk compared to what exactly? That assumes there are only two outcomes. Christianity is true and their God of some stripe exists, or it's not true and no other God exists. But clearly, that's a false dichotomy. There could be a God who punishes people who follow Christianity, or one who only rewards sincere seekers, not those who hedge bets. Until that's addressed, the argument isn't multiplying evidence, it's multiplying assumptions. Wasn't there a razor about that somewhere? Well, let's just see where he takes this.
In other words, Butler's wager isn't about forcing belief, it's about asking whether rejecting Christianity is the bigger risk. Let's dig in a little bit. Pascal's wager has some obvious issues, and Butler's wager fixes them. First, there's the many gods objection. Pascal assumes that you're betting on the Christian God, but critics argue there are countless other options. Zeus, Odin, Vishnu, Allah, you name it. What if you're wrong? Butler doesn't ask you to blindly gamble on a deity. Instead, he challenges you to start with Christianity.
Oh, great. We're actually addressing the many gods objection that I just brought up. Because, again, Butler doesn't resolve it. He just assumes we should start with Christianity. But why? There are thousands of religious systems past and present, each with their own exclusive truth claims. Starting with Christianity assumes it's more plausible, but that's just special pleading unless we're given a reason to prioritize it over, say, Islam or Hinduism or even Norse paganism. In reality, we all have finite time and cognitive bandwidth. Expecting someone to devote a huge chunk of their life to investigating one religion without a compelling reason to prioritize it isn't an irrational wager. What it is a demand for intellectual bias. And if Odin is real and dislikes Christians, you might have just spent your sincere efforts offending the actual god. That's still a gamble, just one with house rules nobody agreed on. So no, Butler hasn't eliminated the problem. At absolute best, he's just given it better manners.
Why? Because it has uniquely strong evidence that sets it apart, and we'll get to that in just a minute.
Unique strong evidence? Okay, let's hold that thought, because I've seen this claim before and it never holds up under scrutiny. This is a huge claim, because from where I'm standing, the so-called evidence for Christianity, like divine incarnation, virgin birth, moral wisdom, resurrection stories, are all things we can find in other traditions. See, when someone says Christianity has unique strong evidence, the first question should be, compared to what? Other religions also claim to have things that are unique. Mithraism, for example, has its own set of distinctive beliefs, like their god being born from solid rock. That's not something you hear every day. Is it evidence? No, but it is unique. Ancient religions all had their mythologies, symbols, and sacred rites. The uniqueness of a belief says nothing about its truth. The Epic of Gilgamesh has a global flood story long before Genesis, and Zoroastrianism had a savior born of a virgin centuries before the Gospels were written. Dionysus died and rose. Buddhism outlined profound ethical principles centuries earlier. Islam and Judaism both claim divine revelation. And if we're talking miracles, Hinduism's got that in spades. So again, what's actually unique here? So if uniqueness is supposed to impress us, and it really shouldn't, and if Christianity actually had strong evidence that made it stand out, then we wouldn't need this wager at all. You just present the evidence and that would be the end of it. But instead, we're still sitting here being told to start with Christianity, as though it's the obvious first step and not just one option in a field of thousands.
Second is the impossibility objection. Pascal's wager makes it sound like belief is a switch that you can just flip.
Wrong.
But belief doesn't work that way. You can't just decide to believe Australia doesn't exist for $1 million. Butler gets it. He's not asking you to force belief. He's asking you to carefully investigate. Inquiry is voluntary, rational, and evidence-driven. If Christianity isn't true, you won't believe it. But if the evidence convinces you, belief flows naturally.
I actually agree with this part. Belief isn't a switch you just flip. You don't get to believe in Atlantis or that Australia doesn't exist just because someone offered you a check. Belief is something that happens when you are convinced by the evidence. And that's one of the main reasons why I hate the phrase, if that's what you choose to believe. Belief isn't a choice. It's a reaction to persuasion. You're either convinced or you are not. But then comes this curious claim. If Christianity isn't true, you won't believe it. Well, I hate to break it to you, but people believe in things that aren't true all the time. That's not a jab, and that's just psychology. If Christianity isn't true and yet millions still believe it, that suggests that belief is shaped by far more than truth alone. Testify. My guy. Christianity isn't true. And yes, I can back up that statement, so come at me if you want. And yet you believe it. So what does that tell us? Either you haven't investigated it as carefully as you claim, or something else, like early indoctrination, emotional need, or social reinforcement, did the convincing. And no shade personally, this is the norm. People believe all sorts of unique things for reasons other than evidence. That's not unique to Christians, that's just human psychology. So the idea that belief automatically tracks with truth is, frankly, naive. So no, belief doesn't naturally flow from truth. It flows from what seems to be true, based on personal, cultural, and emotional factors, which is exactly why careful investigation is necessary, but also why we shouldn't pretend that the truth always leads to belief or that belief always reflects truth.
Third, there's the irrationality objection. Isn't believing for a reward just kind of selfish? Critics of Pascal's wager argue that belief should be based on evidence, not self-interest. Butler's wager aligns perfectly with evidentialism. It's not about believing for the reward, it's about carefully weighing up the evidence and following it where it leads.
I was waiting for this, the irrationality objection. So now we're getting into the ethics of belief, and I'm glad he brought it up. Pascal's wager has long been criticized for appealing to self-interest. Believe just in case, and you'll get a reward or avoid punishment. And yes, that's a pretty flimsy reason to believe something. It's like saying, I believe the stock market will rise tomorrow because I hope it does. It's not belief, it's wishful thinking. Now, Testify claims Butler sidesteps this by aligning with evidentialism, by saying, weigh the evidence carefully, follow it where it leads. And that sounds great. But let's be honest, if the wager is still framed around risk assessment, what you might lose if you're wrong, then self-interest is still the engine under the hood. It's just wrapped in academic language. The motivation to investigate something can still be self-interested, that's fine, but the belief itself should be compelled by the evidence, not the stakes. And once self-preservation becomes the guiding force, you risk biasing your investigation from the start. You start wanting something to be true, which can influence how you interpret the evidence. So Butler's version may sound cleaner, but if your reason for prioritizing Christianity in the first place is, what if I'm wrong and this is the one true religion, then we're still operating under a Pascalian framework, just with better PR.
So why investigate Christianity and not, say, Islam or Buddhism? Fair question, but Christianity makes bold historical claims, none bigger than the resurrection of Jesus. The resurrection wasn't a whispered legend. It was publicly proclaimed right after Jesus' death in Jerusalem, the very place it happened. The apostles didn't just preach it, they preached it under hostile scrutiny, risking torture and execution. People don't willingly suffer and die for something they know is a lie.
Oh boy, here we go again with that argument. But before then, let me address the first part. So why investigate Christianity and not, say, Islam or Buddhism? Great question. And apparently the answer is because Christianity makes bold historical claims like the resurrection of Mr. Jesus. That's the pitch. Now let's break it down. Was this resurrection publicly proclaimed right after his death in Jerusalem? Really? How do you know that? The reality is, nothing about Mr. Jesus was written down during his supposed lifetime. Not a single thing. The earliest writings we have come decades later. Most scholars agree that the first book mentioning him was either 1 Thessalonians or Mark, depending on how you date things. But we're talking at least around 20 years after Mr. Jesus supposedly died. Acts? Even later, somewhere between 80 and 90 CE, though some say as early as 60 CE, so roughly anywhere from nearly 30 to 50 to 60 years after the fact. So let's not pretend the resurrection was being covered by first century CNN. And does it really matter if it was publicly proclaimed instead of whispered? Public proclamation doesn't equal truth. People publicly proclaim nonsense all of the time, and passionately too. There are still folks today who believe, proclaim, and will probably die believing that Donald Trump won the 2020 election. You can be loud, wrong, and ride that belief into the grave. It's literally called the big lie for a reason. Alright, and then, much to my chagrin, we're hit with the old people wouldn't die for a lie argument. I've said this countless times. Yes, people will absolutely die for a lie. If a spy is caught, do you think they suddenly blurt out, "Wait, I was lying, don't kill me"? Well, of course not. People die for lies all the time, if they believe the cause is worth it. People strap bombs to their chests for their ideologies. People go to war believing misinformation. Dying for a belief only proves the sincerity of belief, not its truth. And even if we grant every single martyr story you can bring up, how do you know they had a chance to recant? Where are the transcripts, court records, deathbed interviews? Or are we just assuming they were tortured, asked to deny it, and nobly refused like some Hollywood screenplay? If you don't think about it at all, this argument is emotionally compelling, sure. But historically, logically, and evidentially, it collapses under even the most basic of scrutiny. Christians, please stop using this argument as if it were a good argument. It really isn't.
Now, compare that to Islam. The Quran denies Muhammad performed miracles. Say, for example, Surah 2950, which says, "I am only a clear warner." And the miracle stories in the Hadiths come much later, with zero risk for promoting them. Krishna, his miracles like lifting a mountain were written centuries later, blending legend with theology. Buddha, stories of him taming elephants or walking at birth emerged hundreds of years after his life. Zoroaster, his miracles were recorded millennia later with no hostile witnesses or historical evidence. Christianity's claims are public, early, and bold. So, if you're going to investigate one religion, it makes more sense to start here.
Ah yes, the old Christianity wins because it shouted first routine. Let's unpack this. He claims Islam is weaker because the Quran says Muhammad didn't do miracles, just warned people. That's accurate for the Quran, but let's be honest, miracle claims show up in Islamic tradition later through the hadiths. So we're not comparing miracle to no miracle, we're comparing when the miracle claims show up. And guess what? That's true of Christianity too. The earliest Christian writings, Paul's letters, don't describe empty tombs or a physical Mr. Jesus strolling through walls. They speak of visions, and Mark, the earliest gospel, ends abruptly with women fleeing the tomb in fear. No physical resurrection appears. It's only in the later gospels that the miracles got bigger and bolder. The Krishna example? Sure, written centuries later. But those stories were always intended as theological myth, not historical reportage. Just like many parts of the gospels, if we're being fair. Mr. Jesus multiplying loaves and walking on water? That's not a unique template. Those motifs exist in Greek, Egyptian, and Persian storytelling long before. Zoroaster? The claim that his miracles were written millennia later is just reaching. Dating early Zoroastrian texts is notoriously difficult, and saying no hostile witnesses is a tough standard anyway because who was live tweeting miracles in 600 BCE Persia? The bigger issue here is pretending Christianity's miracle claims are public, early, and bold, therefore trustworthy. But boldness and timing don't equal truth. People have made big public false claims for millennia, some with enormous consequences. Just being the first to make a loud claim doesn't make it correct. What this really shows is how religious traditions embellish over time. That's not a flaw unique to Hinduism or Islam. It's part of the universal pattern of how humans build mythology.
So here's how Butler's wager plays out. If Christianity is false, you lose a bit of time, but you gain a stronger, more informed understanding of one of history's most influential religions. You become a credible critic, not just another Reddit atheist recycling bad arguments.
Oh, hold up. Let's not breeze past that rhetorical elbow. This line isn't simply encouraging investigation. It's a subtle bit of gatekeeping disguised as wisdom. What Testify is saying here, if you study Christianity, you're a credible critic. If you don't, well, you're just another Reddit atheist. That's not an argument, it's poisoning the well. It paints anyone who didn't take the Christian journey first as lazy, uninformed, or unserious. And let's be real, there are plenty of well-read critics of Christianity, including PhDs, historians, and theologians who have studied it deeply and found the claims lacking. They didn't stop being credible just because they didn't follow Butler's preferred apologetic syllabus. He frames his choice as binary. Either you're a thoughtful critic who studies Christianity, or you're a Reddit stereotype. No room for serious thinkers who've studied religion but came away unconvinced. Saying, do this or be a joke, is emotional manipulation, not a logical point. So before we even get to the wager part, he's already trying to bias the audience into seeing his critics as clowns and his followers as scholars. That's not encouraging honest debate, it's rhetorical posturing.
And let's be real, even people with YouTube channels or even PhDs behind their name are guilty of being uninformed critics. Now, if Christianity is true, you gain truth, purpose, and eternal life. That's a really big deal. The stakes are high, but the cost of entry is small.
Alright, now let's address the wager itself. This is still Pascal's wager in a hoodie, just rebranded with a podcast-friendly tone. It says, if Christianity is false, you've only lost a little time, but if it's true, you gain eternal life. Big reward, small cost. Sounds smart, but it hides a lot of assumptions under the table. First, it still pretends it's a two-option game, Christianity versus atheism. But what about Islam, Mormonism, Hinduism? All of these have their own stakes, their own hells, their own promised rewards. If you bet wrong, the cost isn't low. It might be eternal punishment anyway. Butler's wager doesn't solve that, it just punts the problem. Second, the idea that belief is cheap? That's naive. For some people, belief can mean giving up critical thinking, embracing guilt, rejecting their identity, or even severing ties with family or community. That's not just a bit of time. That's a heavy investment, emotionally, mentally, and sometimes physically. And finally, even if Christianity were worth investigating, which, fair, it's historically influential, this guy still hasn't given a valid reason to start there. Though I'm sure he thinks he did. Like I said, there are a ton of unique things to pretty much every religion. So why not start with the Bhagavad Gita, or the Quran, or the Book of Mormon? Just saying the stakes are high doesn't make your religion the best horse to bet on. So in the end, this wager is still stacked with hidden assumptions, emotional manipulation, and selective framing, all dressed up like it's common sense.
are you willing to give Christianity a fair shot? You'll know that you've taken Butler's wager when you can present the strongest case for Christianity and explain why you still reject it.
At first glance, this sounds like an honest challenge. But dig deeper, and it's a loaded demand. Not just that you evaluate Christianity, but you become so versed in its arguments that you could defend them yourselves and then reject them. Now, to be fair, this may be a good strategy for a debate team, but most of us will never get into a formal debate, and especially not one where we don't know what side we'll be arguing. And that's not a reasonable standard. If someone tells me I must argue for astrology better than an astrologer before I can reject it, I'd call that gatekeeping, not being intellectually rigorous. Many skeptics do take Christianity seriously. They wrestle with the strongest arguments, from the Kalam to fine-tuning, from the resurrection to moral objectivity. When they reject it, it's not because they haven't done the homework. It's because they have looked into these arguments, questioned them, and the answers didn't hold up. So, no, you don't need to become a Christian apologist before your rejection of it is valid. That's a false benchmark, not a fair-minded challenge.
Now, I've been following the whole apologetics, counter-apologetics movement for over a decade, and I've yet to see this done. Personally, I would love to see skeptics take me up on this challenge. And I can guarantee you that the people that will be most offended at this video are the people who could stand to take the challenge the most.
Here he's claiming, I've yet to see this done. But that's an argument from personal experience and not evidence. Just because he hasn't seen a well-reasoned rejection doesn't mean it hasn't happened. It may just mean he hasn't looked beyond his own echo chamber. And the claim that the people most offended are the ones that need to take this challenge is a rhetorical trap. It preemptively dismisses any critic as too emotional to engage. That's not reasoning, it's deflection. It's the same tactic used in cults and conspiracy theories. If you push back, that proves we're right. It's unfalsifiable and deeply dishonest. A genuine challenge invites dialogue. This one shuts it down with smug preemption. What Testify has done here is not intellectual confidence, it's insecurity in disguise. And that's the end of his video. So what was he talking about here today? What's the real challenge he has for us atheists? Pascal's wager is famous, but it's got some major flaws. Butler's wager, take Christianity seriously, investigate it carefully with an open mind. A mistake in rejecting Christianity could have far more serious consequences than a mistake in accepting it. Butler doesn't ask that you blindly gamble on a deity. He challenges you to start with Christianity because it has unique, strong evidence that sets it apart. Inquiry is voluntary, rational, and evidence-driven. Butler's wager aligns perfectly with evidentialism. Christianity makes bold historical claims, none bigger than the resurrection of Mr. Jesus. If Christianity is false, you lose a bit of time, but gain a stronger understanding of one of history's most influential religions. But if Christianity is true, you gain everything. You'll know you've taken Butler's wager when you can present the strongest case for Christianity and explain why you still reject it. So what do you think about his points? Do you think Butler's wager is worth anyone's time? Or do you think that Pascal and Butler should be left as a footnote in religious history? Maybe Testify here didn't explain it well. Maybe I missed something. Let me know in the comments below. Overall, I give this video a 7 facepalming Mr. Jesuses out of 10. So pretty good considering. He starts strong by acknowledging flaws in Pascal's wager, and follows up by attempting to elevate the discussion by focusing on evidence and rational inquiry. He does a pretty good job citing Joseph Butler and contrasts him with Pascal, showing at least some engagement with historical thought. And he presents a decently structured argument. His position is clear. But he suggests most skeptics haven't already investigated Christianity deeply. Many atheists, especially content creators or former believers, myself included, have done so extensively. He uses a fair amount of loaded language. Phrases like Reddit atheist or uninformed critics with PhDs dismiss legitimate criticisms through condescension and not argument. He also commits the begging the question fallacy by assuming Christianity has unique, superior evidence without demonstrating it, just asserts it. And he's dismissive of other religions without fair comparative analysis, e.g. Islam's oral tradition is treated as if later equals false, which ignores historical nuance. He also uses out-of-context or oversimplified claims, like the apostles died for their beliefs, as if they are unchallengeable historical facts when they are debated among historians. He gives no sources or critical scholarly engagement and presents theological apologetics as if they were settled academic conclusions. Finally, he throws in several false dichotomies, though specifically glaring is the idea of investigate Christianity or be uninformed, again ignoring that many have studied it and found it unconvincing. That's it for this one. So now, what do you think? Do you think Butler's wager got one over on this atheist? Or are you won over by the wager? Or do you think that this is a thinly veiled attempt to coerce belief like all the rest? Let me know in the comments below. If you appreciated the open-mindedness I displayed in this video, show that by hitting the like button. And you can have a low cost but potentially infinite gain by hitting that subscribe button for more content like this delivered to your YouTubes every week. Though speaking of more sophisticated and intellectually respectable, I need to give an academically rigorous thanks to my patrons, especially Calamimus Anima and Sora, who are the mental fortitude that keep me pushing back with the challenge that is my channel. But if you'd like to be mentally challenged... Wait, that didn't come out right. You know what I mean. You can join them for as low as $1 a month at patreon.com/darkofalltrades. But thank you to all of you, every single one of you who like, comment, share, give super thanks, become patron or channel members, or even just hang out in the live chat. You all are the best encouragement I could have to stay intellectually honest. I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you for everything you do for me and this channel. And as a thanks, here's a little bonus. I couldn't find a lot of information on this, but let's take a serious look at what Testify here calls Butler's wager, which is being touted as a modern twist on Pascal's wager that tries to refine its weaknesses. Here's the strongest version of the argument. Butler isn't just saying believe in Christianity to hedge your bets. Instead, he's inviting skeptics to investigate Christianity deeply, with the idea that even if it is false, you walk away better informed about one of history's most influential religions. You become a stronger, more credible critic. But if it turns out to be true, the payoff is massive: truth, purpose, and eternal life. So the cost if it's false is relatively low, some time and thought, while the reward is if it's true is immeasurable. According to Butler, this makes the wager rational because it improves you either way. It has virtually no downside. He frames it not as blind belief, but as a challenge to explore Christianity seriously and charitably. Pascal's original wager is more simplistic. Believe in God because if you're wrong, you lose little, and if you're right, you gain everything. Butler tries to refine this by encouraging engagement, not just belief, claiming a benefit even if Christianity is false, namely intellectual credibility and deeper knowledge, narrowing the field to Christianity specifically rather than a generic God of Pascal's wager. So in a way, Butler's wager is Pascal's wager, but with homework, and a confidence that exploration alone is worthwhile. So let me take a look at some of the shared logical issues with Pascal's wager and Butler's wager. First, both assume a limited menu. Either Christianity is true or atheism is. But many religions claim exclusive truth: Islam, Hinduism, Mormonism, etc. If you bet on Christianity and Islam is true, you lose. Both wagers imply that a deity would reward belief, even if it comes from a place of pragmatism rather than conviction. But if there is a God who values honest inquiry over belief, then wagering at all might be the wrong move. As with Pascal, Butler treats belief as a rational transaction: input time, output salvation. But belief doesn't work that way. You can't choose to believe something just because it's useful. That's not faith, that's pretense. So now let's look at some logical issues unique in Butler's version. Butler doesn't justify why Christianity, among thousands of other religions, deserve this wager. It presumes Christianity is most worth your time without defending that position. He says you'll know you've taken the wager when you can present the strongest case for Christianity and still reject it. But this is an arbitrary standard. Skeptics don't need to become apologists for the view they reject. That's not how skepticism works in any other context. Disagreement is framed as a sign that you haven't taken the wager seriously, or that you're emotionally defensive. This poisons the well against thoughtful critics and insulates his argument from rebuttal. Investigating a religion deeply, especially Christianity, can involve significant emotional, social, and psychological cost. For people deconstructing trauma, the price isn't just time, it can be very high. Butler's wager is a smarter, more rhetorical, polished version of Pascal's wager. It encourages engagement rather than blind belief, but it still suffers from the same fatal flaw. It assumes one religion deserves special treatment, and it frames belief as a cost-benefit analysis rather than a sincere pursuit of truth. If you're a skeptic who investigates Christianity and still finds it unconvincing, that's not a failure of effort. That is the wager completed. And if the conclusion remains the same, no amount of rhetorical repackaging changes the fact that belief can't, and shouldn't, be forced by fear of missing out. So thanks for hanging out with me to the end of the video. I look forward to your thoughts on Butler's wager and my take on it. And as always, keep learning.